Of all the experimental music released in the 2020s, few bands have entered the zeitgeist in quite the same way as YHWH Nailgun. Formed in 2020, the band have just released their second Ferocious studio album, Magazine, on 4AD. So I caught up with the band at a Thai restaurant in Sydney to chat sonic environments, controlled improvisation, and more. YHWH Nailgun, so nice to meet you all. For anyone who isn't familiar with you guys or what you do, can you introduce yourselves and a little bit about your music?
I'm Zach, and this is YHWH Nailgun.
I'm Sagiv. I play guitar. He sings.
I'm Jack. I play the synths and the sample stuff. This is YHWH Nailgun.
I'm Sam. I play the drums. Jack plays the synth. Sagiv plays the guitar. Zach sings. This is YHWH Nailgun.
And here's the food. Before I'd even heard your guys' music, your name really intrigued me. The coupling's religious illusions with an industrial tool. What was it about that dichotomy that attracted you to that as a name for a group?
When you're early on in a project, I think you're kind of looking for something that encapsulates what you know you're like headed toward. I don't want to sound too like woo-woo about it, but it was like we made the name and it was like, oh yeah, that's going to hold everything that we want to do.
Was the music before the name, or did the name come first?
The name, actually, I think we might have had like a couple licks, a couple beats and a couple licks. Like I think like Hawk Violence was like half made, and like Black Braid, but that was it.
It seems like you're one of the few bands in this sort of experimental noise, anti-rock world that has broken into the wider conversation around alternative music. What would you attribute that to?
Swag.
Swag?
Also, luck. Like
Luck?
a lot of great bands out there don't just things have to line up in a certain way. But yeah, not to downplay what my colleagues here have mentioned already.
I think it's also like, it's such a, to me, like a false dichotomy between like regular music and experimental music. And like, if you're not too self-conscious about it being experimental and you're not presenting it as like, look at what crazy weird guys we are, like I think more people than you would expect will just take it as music and just like listen.
I was going to say, it's also sort of hard to see where you're placed as a band from the other perspective, you know? Like, I can only like really view it from my perspective. It's just like we're making music.
It sounds like there's maybe a dissolving of genre on the creative side as well as on the audience side. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah.
Sure.
It's also just the time, I think, you know, like everything is sort of boiled down. Everything's in the same place now. Everybody's kind of used to things sort of being extreme. So like maybe music that was more for the fringes like a few decades ago, you know, is like more regular, you know.
Do you think that's a positive thing on the whole?
Probably, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe, I mean, on one hand, it probably seems like it has something to do with like the world becoming insane, kind of insane, you know, but it's also, I don't know if you could really say it's good or bad. It's good for us, you know. We can do what we want to do, what we really want to do, and a lot of people will connect to it, which is cool. And I remember like early on in the band, we started playing shows where like people who I didn't think I had anything in common with would come to shows, and I remember being like, "What?" You know, kind of like shocked by it. But that actually is a really nice thing because then you start to dissolve these boundaries between yourself and other people.
Among a certain community of music fans, there's a sort of gatekeeping aspect where it's like, I understand this music because I feel this particular way. But with music that, like yours, that has seemed to resonate with a wider cross-section than others who are maybe in a similar sort of world, do you think that changes the way an audience interacts with the music?
Yeah, I think so. People act like these like sort of divisions, like subcultural divisions, are these like ironclad things that have been around forever. And it's like, it got invented like 40 years ago or something. And I'm always like, of course it's taking on a new form and like it's going to look different now because like compare like this sort of height of these like, you know, like claiming your kind of subcultural allegiance. Like that lasted for a short period of time. And 40 years prior to that, it was like the way people conceptualize music and pop culture is totally different. So I'm like, I don't know. It's like sometimes it feels like people like kind of lament the fact that there's no like punks anymore or metalheads. And I'm like, who gives a shit? You know?
And maybe that works in a positive way in terms of
it's good.
this kind of fusion of different genres or
Yeah,
different solutions.
like let it just die. Who cares, you know?
It's nice looking out in the crowd and seeing cultural diversity with it. Like not one. It's like if I looked out and there was a bunch of like leather jacket mohawk people, I'd be like, okay, I guess we're like a punk band, you know?
Like a sort of forward momentum, and there's no name for the thing. That really is ideal. I think that's like where we want it to be. You know, when we first started, like that, to be putting a lot of energy out into a thing that someone doesn't understand. It's like maybe a more direct way to get to someone's heart. You know, that because when there's a word, it's kind of like almost like a barrier sometimes. You know.
Yeah, maybe a little reductive even to put a label on something and just go, all right, well, this is for people who like this and not for anyone else. Yeah.
I think there's like an inevitable, like a tribal aspect of like being like a music person, and it affects everyone, unfortunately, to like, oh, this type of person likes that and I'm not that type of person, or like, oh, now everyone knows about this band, they're not that cool anymore. There's like little, even like on a subconscious level, but I think as much as you can strip yourself, and in our case of our audience, of those categories, I think it's like good work. It's like what you're kind of supposed to be doing. Think of it as music and think of people as people, like try to kind of reduce it, but in the positive direction.
I saw this like band talk about like the importance of gatekeeping. And it was like this really sort of bad thing watching it, because it was almost seeming like they're holding on. It was like all like nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. And it's like what they're not realizing is like that it's just like creating a new thing rather than like losing something, you know? It was weird.
People say this about what I do, in inherently sort of platforming stuff that isn't maybe so widely recognized. People go like, why would you share this with people? Like this belongs to us. And it's like, it doesn't belong to anyone. It's not even belonging to the artist anymore. It's out in the world and open to interpretation, which is really
Yeah, we talk about that a lot. Like how it's like once you make an album and it's out in the world, it's like not yours anymore, you know?
Even when you're performing, your face doesn't belong to you. You know, your image,
Yeah.
the image of you doesn't belong to you anymore. You know, it's kind of like
Totally.
it's a kind of amazing sort of weird process to go through. You know,
Good things are for sharing. If I think something is good, I want to share it with my fans, and I want, like, especially if it's something that like it's not like scarce resource. Everybody can have it.
Yeah.
And you don't lose anything by sharing it. It's like, why wouldn't you? There's something wrong with you if you don't want people to like experience the joy that you experience.
As I understand it, 45 Pounds was recorded in a goat farm. Magazine was recorded across a couple of different studios. You've done gigs in tunnels and disused train stations. I'm curious as to what role environment has in the writing or performing of music for you guys.
We go into the studio with the music already, like everything's been demoed out, so we know exactly what we're going for already. I think it's more like creating an environment where we can like be comfortable playing on one hand, a room that sounds good, that will be like conducive to like a recording that kind of translates well, something that feels in the style of the music, as long as like it can meet certain like technical standards or whatever.
Does it differ between studio and live performance?
Yeah, definitely. I really enjoyed recording up on the farm, like the waking up and sort of, getting out of the city is really nice, but yeah, our live shows, if I look back and see that we've played in like alternative locations, I also think it's just mainly like trying to do something that's not like just repetitive, playing the same venues. Like we lost a lot of like DIY venues during COVID. I think we were just sort of looking for like more things maybe to like build. We just had this cool show in London that was like put on by NTS that was really fun. We can play in most environments as long as there's like, subs in the right setting, and they supplied like a great sound system. It's really just the like sound system. If it's there, then we can do it.
We see in our recording, kind of a lot of things get kind of lost in the way, like you'd never listen to 45 Pounds and be like, oh, this was in a goat farm or whatever, I think Magazine, maybe we played a little more into it because we recorded in a really big room, but the intent was to get that specific room sound in there so you can hear like the room but even that is like, you know, not as significant of a thing in the record as playing in a tunnel is.
As performers, do you respond differently to different environments?
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's sort of part of like being present and like being in touch with what's happening around you. When we play, like we're all listening to each other. It never feels like rote, you know. The environment being different is sort of always a positive thing to me. We played this show in Paris one time. It's one of my favorite shows that we've had. The stage was really low. Everything was falling apart. And people were running on the stage, and you kind of check somebody, and somebody else comes in and they're hiding underneath the keyboard stand or whatever. Like things keep getting unplugged, you know. And then at one point I said to the guy, like, turn off all the lights. We're pitch black. It's good for things to be happening in the moment, you know.
A singular experience, you know. It's like makes the show, and it makes it, I don't know, people talk about, well, actually, Sam always talks about perfect has been maxed out or whatever, and it's true. And then like you kind of want to have a little bit of a danger in your show or whatever, and like fuck up, and like it's rock music. It doesn't, have a little kind of loosen up.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. Your music is very structured, but also very free. In a live setting, how faithful to the studio recording are you trying to be? Or do you allow for some dynamism and a little bit of looseness?
I feel like that's the word for it, probably, is dynamism, you know? For me, it's like the drum parts are like composed, you know? I'm not improvising, but like the sort of dynamic like contour of the songs or of the set or whatever will vary a lot. And that, like, to me, that's the sort of thing that's based on the environment, is like you're playing to a room no matter what, you know what I mean? Or to like a big outdoor space, and you play differently based on what you're like looking at.
What we're looking for in the writing, at least me, a kind of controlled improvisation, I guess, like riffs that could be played sort of slightly differently, or like a vocal line that, you know, always having something anchored so that something else can be free.
You've become quite renowned for the physicality of your live performances. What sort of demands does that make on you guys doing this night after night?
Yeah, sometimes I'm like pushing myself a little bit, but I don't do it if I don't want to, you know. Like that would be crazy if I was like if I, if I was like forcing myself to move around like crazy when I don't want to. It would just be so stupid, you know. It's just sort of like the music makes me want to move around, you know. I like the expressive aspects of performing. Like I like knowing that the audience is watching and that I'm telling them something with what I'm doing, you know. There's like this whole kind of weird, there's a whole kind of language. You can communicate all of these things that you actually kind of want to communicate in that way. And that keeps it fresh too.
Let's talk about your own music tastes. I ask this of everybody I interview, but if you could play me any album, what would you play me? And feel free to pick one each.
Shaking the Habitual, The Knife.
Oh, cool.
Do you know one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that record I feel like is a real sort of like Rosetta Stone for me. You know, it kind of has everything that I want in an album.
What do you like about it?
I love the
You have to shout out Boon Cafe.
In Cafe.
it's like, you know, it's like beat music, you know, like but it's not exactly techno. It's kind of in a techno-y sort of world, but it has all this live instrumentation that kind of takes it into this more like composition sort of world. And then the vocals are so powerful and strange and charismatic. They sit in this sort of like these incredibly detailed like rhythmic compositions that use synthesizers, and I mean, it really is like I think a big album for the band.
I listened to that Hell Hath No Fury record by Clipse today on the plane. It's the
Doesn't
best.
get better than that.
It doesn't get better than that. It's like the best beats, best production, best lines. It's incredible. Malice and Pusha T, Pharrell production. Beats are so incredibly good. Very like inspirational for the band.
Have you ever listened to that album Swastikas for Gotti by Current 93?
No, I have not.
It's awesome.
What's it like?
It's kind of like he's like this like woodland elf drawing on like the tradition of English music, but in this like totally like schizophrenic way. But it's totally sincere, and he doesn't have any kind of like ironic detachment. I like how grating his voice is. I like the instrumentation. I like that it like conjures up like this weird world that was like probably never real, but it doesn't feel like he's like attached to some specific historical period as much as he just thinks that shit is cool.
And how about you?
There's an album I can't shake off. I've been listening to it for like 2 years, and you kind of think you're over it, and then you come back and it hits just as hard.
Yeah.
It's this cumbia album by Gaiteros de San Jacinto. It's a Colombian band.
Cool.
A specific type of cumbia from Colombia that's called gaita. It's like made with drums, flutes, and vocals, and it's I like that there's no like it's like an old band, kind of like a family band, carrying a tradition, and it feels like there's no like pretense of like kind of like a brand or whatever, the way there is in a lot of like Western music nowadays. And it's just kind of like more pure, so to speak, very kind of like so from the heart. I think Toño Garcia was an old member of the band, probably like one of the founding members.
Cool.
El Último Cacique means the last chief. And there's even a song in there that's kind of like a very like beautiful melody that's like dedicated to him, and they refer to him as like the master.
Wow.
Which is also kind of like touching,
Oh, that's awesome. Sounds like a really spirited listen. Well, YHWH Nailgun, thanks very much. Appreciate it.